Hi, my name is Danny Rouse, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on genetically modified organisms. What are genetically modified organisms and how are they created? Well, GMOs are living organisms whose genetic material has been manipulated in a laboratory through genetic engineering. These genetic code mutations cannot be created in nature, so therefore they have to be done with genetic engineering. Genes that scientists are interested in are extracted from organisms and inserted into the DNA in the nucleus of a cell. During this part of the process, most of the cells remain unchanged and untouched. And I got this information from the Purdue Agricultural site. The methods for inserting the DNA kind of vary. There's one method that uses a gene gun to shoot metal particles into the DNA of the organism, and then there's another method that you can use a virus to infect the cell with new DNA. And there's also another method you can use electric shocks to create holes in a cell, and you force the DNA into the sperm holes. Naturally occurring plant hormones are given to the GMO to initiate its growth after this, and this helps with the development phase as well. Then the cells divide, and the cells start to specialize in certain functions before they are regathered into the whole. What are GMOs used for? GMOs have a variety of uses. They're generally used for resistance to bugs, resistance to certain herbicides, resistance to disease. There's just droughts or extreme temperatures. They enhance growth and development by increasing nutrient levels of the organism. They lessen the eroding of soil. And they also are used to make vaccines such as insulin. And I got this information from Teresa Phillips, who has a PhD, and it's from SciTable by Natural Education. GMOs are usually used in crops such as soy, corn, cotton, and rice. For the resistance to bugs, they are used to fight off European corn borer, which is it's like a moth type insect that really likes to eat corn, and it's a huge problem for them. For resistance to herbicide, it's usually soybeans that have some type of resistance to Roundup or other popular pesticides, and 94% of GMOs are now for soybeans are now GMOs. The faster growth is an idea that's still in development. It's used on coho salmon eggs and has been proven to increase growth rates by significant levels. And as I mentioned before, vaccines such as insulin are also another way that GMOs help people today. GMOs are pretty controversial. They are known to have a pretty high environmental impact. As I'll be going through this presentation, though, there's two sides to the argument. The first side of the argument, though, is that they're bad. So mixing GMO organisms and non-GMO organisms can create various problems. Problem number one is during the pollination process, bees can die from collecting pollen from a GMO, and this also causes monarch butterflies to die at alarming rates because there's been a decline in milkweed, and this is usually because they can't withstand the pesticide that soybean or corn or other GMOs bring to the table, and they can't withstand this type of pesticide, so they die. And then the animals that rely on the milkweed for some shelter or food, they also die. And another problem is that the GMOs can contaminate soil and water sources toxins. There's some Bt toxins that can be released, and they're very unhealthy for humans. They can increase allergies and flu symptoms and can also make people allergic to a wider range of allergens. There's some toxic residues that are left behind by some of the GMOs, and they can be released into soil. Also, the nutrients aren't released back into the soil from GMOs, so the soil contains less nutrients than before. Also, the irrigation can carry these toxins that we were talking about into the drinking water or other sources of water, which can be very detrimental to the rest of the environment. There's also a book that I read called Genetic Roulette by Jeffrey Smith. He also made a movie about it, and there's also some digestive problems, and there's also been some links to autism. There's been a lot of different theories out there about what GMOs do, but a lot of people think that they do more harm than good. Another side of the argument, though, is that GMOs have had a positive environmental impact by reducing the amount of CO2 emissions. According to the Genetic Literacy Project, 28 million kilograms of CO2 emissions were reduced, which is the equivalent of taking 12.4 million cars off the road or 2.5 million US homes with all their energy. So this is a lot of CO2 emissions that were decreased because of the use of GMO crops. For instance, If you look at rice, rice acts as a transmitter for methane to get into the soil when the rice paddies get flooded. There are now gene mutations where a barley gene can be inserted into the rice gene so that 90% less methane is produced. And I found this information from the American Society, and it's a study done by the Swedish University of Agricultural Science. GMOs also have a pretty important social and economic impact. They were first introduced to farmers in 1996, and they've really grown in popularity since then. 18 million growers in 28 different countries now use them. They can be used they can use less land to produce more food, which in theory saves money, but there's also been a lot of farmers who have complained about how expensive it is to buy the seed. For example, a soybean can be grown at $6 an acre, but it costs $40 an acre for the farmer. So buying the seeds is really annoying for the farmer because there's usually some specialty seller who produces all the seeds and sells them at a very high rate, so they know that like no one else can produce it like this, so I have free reign to charge whatever I want. And this becomes a problem when farmers are trying to sell their products for a decent price to the rest of the civilians, but they know they still have to make a profit. And I found a lot of my information on the soybean, like how much it costs to create soybean GMOs from the Chronicle of Higher Education. In conclusion, there's a ton of controversy around whether GMOs are a good or bad thing. I believe there's merit to both sides. As I've talked about, there's medicines and cheaper crops that can resist droughts and they can resist insects. And there's a lot of positive things that GMOs bring to the table. But there's also some important environmental impacts, and sometimes it's also very costly to the farmers and taxpayers who really worry about whether these GMOs are worth it. Thanks. I hope you guys learned a good bit about GMOs today.